Need some sound.
I've been walking with my face turned to the sun. Weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head, just in case I have to run. I do what I can when I can, while I can for my people. While the clouds roll back and the stars fill the night, that's when I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones. Early in the morning, before the sun begins to shine, we're gonna start moving towards that separating line. I'm wading through muddy waters. You know I gotta make up mind. And I don't mind if I lose any blood on the way to salvation. And I fight with the strength that I got until I die. So I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. And I know what's around the bend might be hard to face 'cause I'm alone. And I just might fail, but Lord knows I'll try. Just as fill up the sky. Stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Do you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. I hear freedom calling, calling me to answer. Gonna keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones.
That's a hard song to stop playing.
Oh man.
I was waiting for a good part, and I'm like, oh, it just keeps going up and up and up. I can't stop this yet.
My family and I sung that at our book launch.
Oh man, that is amazing.
I should say my nieces and some of our family members because they were the lead singers.
That is great. Yes, it does give me those high school
Hmm.
graduation vibes. You know what I mean? The selection from the chorus. Um, so grateful um, for everyone who's here. We see people who are introducing themselves in the YouTube chat. While I'm monitoring what's going on over there too. Welcome to our feature event for the day. My name is Chris Rogers, and I'm the program director at this wonderful place behind me, the Paul Robeson House and Museum, which is located at 50th and Walnut Streets in West Philadelphia. The Paul Robeson House Museum is a project of the West Philadelphia Cultural Alliance, founded by Francis Alston and currently ran by Miss Renoka Michael. Um, and Also, we're in the midst of doing executive director interviews right now, thinking about our next year. So great things, and we are grateful for so many different people and organizations who have cared for us throughout this unprecedented year, and continue to make a way for our organization to do its work. And I am so privileged and happy to have on a book that we were in April of this year we were going to have an amazing event at the house to really like spotlight. It's a book that everyone needs to know, history that everyone needs to know, and the name of the book is called They Carried Us. um, Social impact of Black women in Philadelphia. All right, so I got this. I want to get this slide up to kind of give you all an introduction of what's going to happen. And while that slide is there, I'm gonna read a bit of the introduction that was given to us. So let me get this slide up and going for you all to see. All right. Um, the ethic of equality, a special dialogue with the authors of They Carried Us in collaboration with the Paul Robeson House and Museum. We have with us Alina Baker Rogers and Fasaha Traylor, the authors of They Carried Us, the social impact of Philadelphia's Black women leaders. Um, we're so grateful to you both for making space and trying out this new way of communicating with these virtual streaming sessions. We are live on YouTube right now, and I am really excited for the conversation. And I really love that the flow of today will allow me to step back and really be a fan and watch and be in the comments with the other folks. So um, the authors have an amazing presentation for us this afternoon, or maybe going into the evening, and we'll take that in and feel free to continue to leave comments and questions and thoughts in the YouTube comments. And then, you know, after their presentation, we'll come back and see if we can mix a little bit of them in for just a little bit, just a little while we have the authors on the call. And it promises to be fun. So, Alina, should I leave this up when I pass this
You
off?
could you could go ahead and take it down now. That's
Okay.
okay. Yeah, sure.
All right. So without any further ado, I want to bring to the Paul Robeson House virtual stage Alina Baker Rogers and Fasaha Traylor to tell you about this wonderful book They Carried Us. Thank you, and let me
Thank,
step back.
thank you, and thanks so much for having us. I have to tell you that, as I said to you a moment, a few minutes ago, being a native West Philadelphian and looking at the background there, I can't tell you how many times I've walked that street. I know that street like the back of my hands. I'll say it like that. The other thing is that as a native West Philadelphian and a native Philadelphian, there's no one who knows me as Alina Rogers. Maybe my family, that's maybe, but I'm mostly known as Sissy. So I want to proceed by saying, hi, I'm Sissy Rogers, and we'd like to speak with you tonight about the ethic of equality. And we're going to definitely, make sure that we leave some time for you folks to ask us some questions. But when we think about the ethic of equality, You think about the women that they carried us having some type of presence and a determination of spirit that we believe all of the women and they carried us possess this. We want to begin our talk though with sharing with you some of our personal reflections from doing this work, since that's a question that we tend to get. So I'll start, and then Fasaha will take it from there. Um, for me, the women, I feel like the women of they carried us humbled me, because it's clear that they believed my life had value despite not having even known me. I've taken many messages from them, but none more important than caring and helping others. The women who grew up poor in West Philadelphia have especially touched me because it was my native home and condition in life as well. Women like Frances Walker, Lynette Brown Stowe and her mother, Charmaine Matlock Turner, Denise King, Tina Sloan Green, Joan Myers Brown, Inez Patterson, Sandra Dungy Glenn, Dr. Asali Solomon and her sister Akiba, Reverend Dr. Lorena Marshall Blake, Christine James Brown, Aisha Shahida Simmons, Maddie Humphrey, Dr. Emma Chappelle, and Bishop Audrey Bronson. And when we talk about all of the women and they carried us, my thoughts immediately go to who they were as altruistic people. So many people get up to go to work, but the women of they carried us did so much more by consistently getting up to go to mission. And therefore, they each have had somewhat of a spiritual dimension about themselves. So, how you want to share your personal reflections?
In my garage is a homemade sign from 1992. It's a white poster board nailed to a 2x4 piece of lumber. And that sign says, Anita Hill speaks for me. Until this year, or maybe the last 4 years, I have probably never been as furious as I was during the Clarence Thomas hearings. I was furious enough that when Arlen Specter held a town hall meeting in Germantown, I trekked over there with my sign and held it high for the entire time, marching back and forth alone in front of the entrance as people went in to hear him. It was a turning point for me. I didn't care whether anyone agreed with me or not, or whether his supporters liked me being there or not. I had really reached the end of my tolerance for Black women being ignored and disrespected. I was more than a feminist. I was a Black feminist, which meant that I was on the battlefields of both race and sex. I contributed to and signed the full-page New York Times advertisement entitled African American Women in Defense of Ourselves, which expressed our fury in no uncertain terms. A few weeks later, I discovered that there were many other Black women who felt exactly as I did, and we formed the Ain't I a Woman Network in Philadelphia. We were done. Fast forward to 2014. The battlefields of race, sex, and class are where we found all the women of They Carried Us. I feel so honored to hold up the bloodstained banner for each and every one of them. So we want to talk a bit about the foundation of equality. How did that emerge among our people and in our communities? When Jefferson wrote, "All men are created equal," he didn't really believe it. We say that based on those he cordoned off from equality for whatever reason. Some historians say he really meant that all nations were created equal. But whether he meant individual equality and didn't really believe it, or wasn't thinking about individuals at all, Black women in Philadelphia believed in individual equality, fought for individual equality, and helped to develop an ethic of equality within a nationwide thrust to extend human and civil rights to all. The Fortin family was a family of abolitionists during the colonial and antebellum period. Charlotte Fortin bore 9 children, and 3 of their daughters, Margaretta, Harriet, and Sarah, were active in anti slavery causes through teaching, writing, speaking, fundraising, and running the Philadelphia Female Anti Slavery Society. It cannot be emphasized enough how much women were not supposed to speak up about the issues of the day, but they did. Sarah emphasized racial inequality, saying, quote, "It originates from dislike to the color of the skin, much as from the degradation of slavery." She advocated equal treatment. He, talking about her father, James Fortin, has usually 16 or 20 journeymen, one half of whom are white, but I am not aware of any white sailmaker who employs colored men. I think it should be reciprocal. Do not you? Sarah Mapps Douglas came from another abolitionist family, and though she was a Quaker herself, blasted them for their inability to practice equality before God. Quote, "There is a bench set apart at the meeting for our people, whether officially appointed or not, I cannot say. But this I am free to say, that my mother and myself were told to sit there, and that a friend sat at each end of the bench to prevent white persons from sitting there. I have not been in Arch Street for 4 years, but my mother goes once a week, and frequently she has a whole long bench to herself." Jarena Lee insisted to the newly formed Mother Bethel African Methodist Episcopal denomination of Richard Allen that she, like any man, could preach the word of God. If the, quote, "If the man may preach because the Savior died for him, why not the woman?" she asked. Sissy?
Harriet Tubman believed the enslaved should be freed and that she was equally entitled to enter heaven. She once said, "Now look here, John saw the city, didn't he? Yes, John saw the city. Well, what did he see? He saw 12 gates, didn't he? 3 of those gates was on the north, 3 of them was on the east, and 3 of them on the west. But there were 3 more, and them gates was on the south. And I reckon if they kill me down here, I'll get into one of them gates, don't you?" The writer and abolitionist Frances Ellen Watkins Harper invoked a mother's feelings about slavery. She knew that nothing was greater than the determination of a mother to free her child from a lifetime of inequality. Her poem, Eliza Harris, in part says this: "Like a fawn from the arrow, startled and wild, a woman swept by us bearing a child, and her brow was overshadowed with anguish and care. She was entering the river and reaching the brink. She heeded no danger. She paused not to think, for she is a mother, her child is a slave, and shall give him his freedom or find him a grave." The women that we're going to talk about now, they, as well as other women in the book, certainly developed this ethic of equality in the city of Philadelphia. And the ethic, we believe, was the foundation on which generations Philadelphia Black women battled for their communities and on behalf of their own human and civil rights. And to a person, racism permeated all of their experiences. Dr. Dr. Rebecca J. Cole, 1846 to 1922. She wrote, "No good work is ever accomplished unless it is animated and directed by a controlling thought." Her thought was on providing safety nets for women and children while teaching them how to lift themselves up. Instead of simply giving them fish, Rebecca taught them how to fish. And instead of allowing others to blame poor families for their situations, Rebecca redirected the blame where it belonged, on outside forces that were intent on holding Blacks down. She was incensed by class inequality, the denigration of poor people, and especially by what she viewed as deliberate intentionality to sequester them in low paying labor, substandard housing, and inhumane healthcare. Rebecca wrote, "On the point of deaths from consumption, I would say this: hosts of the poor are attended by young, inexperienced white physicians. They inherited the traditions of their elders. And let a Black patient cough, they immediately have visions of tuberculosis. Let him die, and he writes tuberculosis and heaves a great sigh of relief that one more source of contagion is removed. Are colored people largely forced to live in unsanitary districts? And are they more ignorant and careless about the laws of health? Or are they suffering the fate of all exotics? We must attack the system of overcrowding in poor districts, that people may not be crowded together like cattle while soulless landlords collect 50% of the investments. These are the things that we can do to attack vice, disease, and crime in their strongholds, for they have no complexion and they always yield to such treatment." Dr. Cole is actually one of my favorite people in the book. I shouldn't really say that because most of the women are my favorite in the book. There are a lot of them. And as Fasaha says, every time she talks about one of them, that person is her favorite. Dr. Cole right now I'm feeling her. She was the second of five mulatto children born to formerly enslaved parents. But get this, she was the first Black woman to graduate from Women's Medical College, and she was the second Black woman to become a physician in the United States. She spent 9 years between the period of 1872 and 1881 as a tenement physician. In that position, she visited and treated poor families in slum neighborhoods in New York. She taught them how to improve family hygiene, prenatal, and infant care. She then moved to Columbia, South Carolina, where she established a private practice. And on returning to Philadelphia in 1894, she established another private practice and also co founded the Physician Women's Directory Center, all of this in North Philadelphia. Rebecca was convinced, quote, and I quote, that if the hand of friendship were held out to the unfortunate mother, especially before the birth of her child, she could be persuaded to keep her baby. These were vulnerable women who very often had to leave their children unattended while they went to work. Um, she had a special concern for young girls housed in reform schools, such as one that she worked in when she was in New York. She believed that they deserved training opportunities for worthwhile employment and not dead end domestic work. She wrote, "If the employment given be of such a nature that the girls find themselves treated as intelligent beings, continuous employment would certainly be a success. Otherwise, it will not be." The argument offered against teaching girls useful employment because only domestic service is offered to them is unworthy of those who have the interest of a community at heart. In 1899, rather, Rebecca served as the superintendent for the government house for children and old women in Washington, D.C., and she subsequently became a member of Philadelphia's African American Women's Club movement. That movement championed against racial and social injustices. And one of Rebecca's last acts against racial discrimination came when she was invited to convene a group of Black women by the all white Ladies Centennial Committee. And so she convened the group of women, and then as she when she learned that that the Black women's group was going to be a separate arm of the committee, she disbanded it in that very moment. She was not going to tolerate that. Fasaha, you want to pick up?
Dolores Brisbane, who was born in 1933, she grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, where her entire childhood was spent in a segregated community. Her all-Black teachers nurtured her talents, even though neither her family nor her community had much by way of material resources. Her first encounter with the effects of inequality came when she studied nursing at Tuskegee Institute. That was where she learned that the health problems of pregnant Black Alabama women were rooted in the inequality of their socioeconomic conditions. Dolores came to Philadelphia in 1959. She was hired at the University of Pennsylvania Hospital as a head nurse. And for those of you who have the book, you really have to read, read about that interview where she was hired, because that is the funniest thing I've ever heard. But anyway, she learned to roll with the punches she experienced every day. Racist remarks, racist gestures, behaviors, and actions. She decided that she would not let her environment change who she was. And eventually she changed her environment. In 1975, after leading the separation of Graduate Hospital from the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania, Dolores was asked to become the president either of Graduate Hospital or to establish a planning office at HUP. She chose HUP. She had a staff of 12, mostly men, who really didn't believe this was a woman's role, and especially not a Black woman's role. Her years of parrying insults, disrespect, and what we now call microaggressions helped her to navigate that space. When she was asked to become chief operating officer of the hospital, it was with the ethic of equality that she staffed her office with women and men who reflected the diversity of the workforce. One of my favorites, Prathia. In fact, I usually call her Prathia, Lord Prathia. She was born in 1940 and died very early in 2002. Reverend Dr. Prathia Hall was born in Philadelphia in 1940 and was a graduate of Girls High. Actually, about a third of the women in the book were Girls High graduates. She believed that, quote, religion and politics were woven together in the fabric of life. She wanted to be a minister, but as she put it, I knew almost no ordained women ministers who were taken seriously by the church. In 1962, she left Temple University, convinced that the movement in the South was God's work and also my sacred calling. She joined SNCC in Southwest Georgia, where she where she developed the concept of what she would later call freedom faith. Quote, I had never in my life been so profoundly moved as I was by the mass meetings that were central rallying points of the movement. They began with a prayer service of the Black Christian tradition. The raised voices and the rhythmic stomping of feet could be heard far in advance of one's arrival at the church ground. The undulating wave of these old call and response lined hymns drew latecomers and visitors into the warm embrace. It was impossible to stand as a spectator outside the circle of this communion. That power, which those songs and prayers were infused, transcended the objective reality of our situation, fashioned fear into faith, cringing into courage, suffering into survival, despair into defiance, and pain into protest. She did a lot in the South, in both Southwest Georgia and in Selma, Alabama. She was there for Bloody Sunday, but she left the South and came back to Philadelphia. After graduating from Princeton Theological Seminary, she preached and taught against what she called bondage doctrine. According to her, many of her fellow preachers were teaching, quote, a view of scripture and the gospel that was grounded in a misreading of the Bible. In her reading, quote, God created two creatures, both containing elements of both genders. She believed ministers should preach a vision of partnership between women and men. And she warned ministers and congregations away from the, quote, sin that is the idolatry of sexism that exalts genital fixations of a sinful culture and dares to blame that bigotry on God. Prathia Hall's practice of the ethic of equality is poignantly expressed. Quote, every spring there is a great revival in Philadelphia. The church is at least half full of preachers. For a few years, I attended the revival, desiring to find medicine for my own needy soul. The revivalists came out and thanked God for the presence of all the brother preachers, and then invited all the brother preachers to stand. Sitting in the pew, I was immediately confronted with a crisis of identity. Which do I own, my call or my gender? Do I sit and deny this call, this claim of God on my life decreed by God before I was formed in the womb? Do I sit and now again another time add to my own history of shame for the years I tried to do everything but answer this call? Or do I stand and deny my gender? A preacher I am, a brother I am not. I finally resolved the violent conflict by standing, because when I stood as I am. I stood in the total authenticity of my being. Black, preacher, Baptist, woman. For the same God who made me a preacher is the same God who made me a woman. And I am convinced that God was not confused on either count. Sissy?
The last woman that we're going to talk about is Dr. Lorleen Jones, and then afterwards we'll open up for questions. Lorleen Jones was a basketball athlete, coach, and also and actually the Title IX champion in Philadelphia for girls in sports. Reflecting on her time as a coach, she said, "My girls came with baggage. They came from places where padlocks and evictions were many." Lurleen believed that the ethic of equality did not exclude girls from sports. And if it meant going to battle against racial and gender injustices, she was quick to do so. Lurleen also believed in possibilities, that the world could be a better place and that her young charges could reach the stars. To me, there is nothing more inspiring than belief in the possibility of others. So here's Lurleen. She grew up in a large family in the brewery town section of the city. She was quite the rambunctious and out of control young girl until she was told that she was adopted. And that act was actually an intervention of sorts, an admonishment to Lurleen to love and respect those who took it upon themselves to love her. She was later inspired by Dr. Ruth Wright Hare, who's in chapter 3 of They Carried Us, while a student at William Penn High School for Girls. Yes, there was previously a William Penn High School for girls, and now there's William Penn High School, and there was a girls' high and some other fashion of that as well. We learned those things in our research. But what Lurleen said that when she was a student at William Penn High School for girls, she said when we walked in there, Dr. Hare told us that we were going to be the best people in the world. Imagine that from your school principal. Lurleen took that message with her to Morgan State College in Baltimore, where she discovered racial discrimination in a local movie theater and coffee shop. She participated in student government led protests and those led by the Congress of Racial Equality. At one point, she was jailed for 5 days, and afterwards she participated in the historic 1963 March on Washington. She was amongst a group of students who were hosed by police and attacked by dogs in Salisbury, Maryland. But years later, her name, along with others, were engraved on a campus walkway leading down to the same leading to the same downtown area where they once fought for uh, the right to be able to attend the movie theater and to enter the coffee shop. She and other women, students who she worked with, they also have their pictures on campus, and it's set up as a monument to them and the work that they did as student civil rights activists. As a girls basketball coach, Lurleen was known as No Nonsense Jackson. And the phrase went that Miss Jackson don't play. She took young girls into her home. She nurtured their academic and athletic growth and celebrated their achievements. Her mantra was books, basketball, boys, in that order. When it was discovered that there was a shorter playing season for girls, she pounced on the disparity. She met with the Office of Civil Rights and filed suit against the School District of Philadelphia for violation of the 1972 Title IX law, federal law, related to federal funding for educational institutions. The law mandated equal access for girls in athletics and sports. Because of her lawsuit, Lurleen was harassed, she received hate mail, and she was blamed for causing trouble by the male coaches. But she didn't back down. Because of the lawsuit, and rather than extend the Catholic girls' season, the Archdiocese of Philadelphia pulled out of all citywide title games with the school district of Philadelphia. And in fact, 30 years passed and Lorleen was retired by the time the school district and archdiocese resumed resumed title games. She said, especially coming off of the civil rights movement, that's what we fought for, equality. But as I said, I was much younger and naive. Who sues the people who signs their checks? I didn't think it was something big. I never thought about it like that until many years later. I just thought I was doing the right thing and that we were following the federal law. So,
So, so all of these women pursued what we are calling an ethic of equality. Their careers and their family lives were based on it. Sometimes they articulated it clearly, and sometimes it was just the way they lived their lives. It's ironic that men like Washington and Jefferson came to be identified with the ideals of freedom and equality when these and other Black women were so deeply engaged in not just talking about it, but being about it. And when we say they carried us, this is what we mean. Okay, I think we're ready for questions, and I hope, Chris, that you're going to be able to funnel the questions to us from wherever
Sure.
you're funneling them from.
Yeah. I just want to first say what an amazing presentation, amazing set of stories. We have a number of people in the chat um, who have talked about like picking up the book over at Harriet's bookshop and looking through it and then coming to this talk. We have um, folks who have connections with some of the women that were mentioned. Shout out to Miss Bernita, who's my soror, Norlene Jones.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Yes, yes.
Crystal Crystal Dillard saying like this. I'm looking to start a book group around this text. So a lot of great stories are coming together in the chat, and I would love to ask you all a bit. We got to hear some of the amazing stories, but also want to ask you all a bit about like the research process to bring together such a collection. What did the research process look like for collecting and documenting these stories?
so you want to start and I jump in, or
Okay, all right. We did all kinds of research. We did certainly documentary research. We were in places like the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, looking at papers from, and photographs of a lot of these women. We of course read thousands of books. Um, so there were really we used whatever was available, and like many people have said already, not us necessarily, but other people have really remarked on, especially when you get back into the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, the lack of documentation about the lives of Black women, Black people, and especially Black women is really a hindrance. It's really a hindrance. But, there is a lot of stuff out there, and we tried to get what we could.
we also, and this speaks to how the book is, I guess, organized in some way, or how we approached our research. In addition to what Fasaha has outlined, we actually interviewed
Oh, yeah.
the 49 contemporary women who were in the book, who are in the book. And those interviews were based on a protocol that we developed. We wanted to be able to look for themes across the women's stories, We wanted to be able to pull out, similarities or differences, and understand, what their family backgrounds are like. So we didn't, for those of you who haven't seen the book, it doesn't start with these women as adults. Each of the stories of the contemporary women, and many of the forerunners as well, go back to their childhood, because we wanted our audience to get a sense of, how their lives evolved. The interviews, I should tell you, um, probably were anywhere between 3.5 to 5 hours, which means
Sometimes
that
multiple sessions too.
exactly. So that it wasn't all in one sitting. And then there's, the process of weeding through, all the transcripts and the research, the historical research that Fasaha referred to, and it's a process that takes time. Um, you try to get it right as best as possible, and right means taking time. Although believe me, we were exhausted, and
Yeah.
and Fasaha even bought us this thing. You probably can't see it behind me, but our mantra was "write or die," and that's what we did for 6 years.
Yes, I'm so happy you shared that story, and um, also, and I, in particular, it is so true about the lack of documentation around Black people and Black women in particular. Um, but I know in Philadelphia has also been a site, like the Library Company of Philadelphia has
Yeah.
also been a site where a lot of research,
Yes,
in particular, like, the Robeson House were kind of partial to like the Bastille family legacy, and how
Yes.
those women are
absolutely.
Well, yes,
As
absolutely.
well you should be, and we definitely, uh you know write about the Bastille women, and I don't even know which one of them are my favorite. All of them.
And there's so many of them. There
Like,
are so many of them. It's really
Yeah.
fascinating.
And for those who might be watching, Paul Robeson is the son of Maria Bastille, a family of educators, and fought, like people who fought for women's rights. Um, I don't want to get too much longer in the stories. We have some other amazing questions that have
okay.
come in. One is, I think you all have sort of mentioned this in different ways, but Crystal Dillard is thinking about like inspiring, or like what women are inspiring to you now or in the moment. It's probably too much to ask who's the most inspiring, but I think like in particular to, we're in a moment where kind of two things are happening. One, we just sort of elected the first Black woman vice president, right?
Mhm.
And there's so many sort of like political leaders that are people who have like contributed to even political movements that are featured in the book. But also, it's like that Black women were like crucial in the election to having it come out the way that it did.
Right,
So I
right.
wonder, in terms of like, this moment or what's going on now, are there any sort of like stories or people you haven't mentioned today that stand out? This is what Crystal Dillard is asking.
I assume, is it Crystal?
Yeah, Crystal Dillard is her name.
Okay, Crystal. I assume her question is about the women and they carried us, or
Yeah, which woman?
women.
Her exact question, I tried to put some sauce on it, was
That's okay.
which woman do you find most inspiring and
Yeah.
why? Yeah,
Crystal. Oh man, that is really seriously an impossible question to answer. Um, I would say that there's a hat that we wore as, the researchers and the authors who put this book together. But then there's another side of us, which are, the Black women. We are Black women, and so we obviously identify so much with these women. I can't pick one, but I will say this, that the women of West Philadelphia,
Okay, next she's gonna start talking about Addison Street. Go
Addison
ahead, go
Street.
ahead.
I don't know, it's really hard. But I would tell you what my knee jerk reaction was. My knee jerk reaction was that one woman who inspired me so much and who is so important to me in the book is Frances Walker. I met Frances in the early 90s, and a number of the women are in their 80s or so now,
Yes.
and Frances is one of them. But she took me along, on her career. We worked together a lot, and I learned a lot from her about how to be a black woman leader, and how to be an advocate and an activist. So
I would say that there is no woman in this book who is not inspiring in some way or another.
mhm.
Right now, I'm thinking about Sonia Sanchez, who her story, I hope that people, even though Sonia seems so familiar to people, I hope that people will read her profile and find out some things about her that perhaps they did not know. Her interview was an interview that was actually never even finished because
Right.
Sonia is a professor. She is a teacher. And there was so much to her life. I mean, there was so much that we could not even fit in there about her life. But it was truly, I mean, I think her life is really quite inspiring. And we are really so pleased that she did the foreword to our book. That was, we were really very honored by that.
Thank you both. We sort of have opened the floodgates some, and I'm gonna try to pull it together, do one question, and then a bit of a final thought, so to speak. And another one, and I think this one is kind of like striking. Bernadine Halls, and she speaks like in particular to you, Fasaha. She says, Fasaha, you've been in the arts. Was there a fade from the arts? And when I think of the arts in this book, the thing is striking to me is the cover and the artwork on the cover.
Yes.
Can you give us a bit of the story of the cover and
Yes.
maybe a bit of the influential people in the arts that maybe found the books other than Sonia Sanchez is one of those people you mentioned too?
Well, the arts. Oh my goodness. That first of all, the cover art. I'm going to tell this story every time I get the opportunity to do that. We had some sort of idea that we were going to collect different people's photographs and make some kind of collage on the cover. But after you have 95 women, and we said, ooh, that's not going to work. And we said, we really need something symbolic. And as soon as we thought of the idea of symbolic, I said, well, we have to go to Barbara Bullock and see whether she has an image that we can use. And so I called her and she said, well, sure, I have plenty of images, but I'm not going to choose. You have to come over here and choose it yourself. So this is Barbara Bullock's image. We had a choice of two, we ended up going through her studio. That in itself, I have to tell you, that in itself is the most exhausting thing, to go into Barbara Bullock's studio, because it is so visually stimulating that I had to come home and go to bed. Okay. But we left there with two images and we chose this one. Because
Tell them what it's made of. Tell them what
Barbara
material.
Bullock, this she calls this a sculpture. It's made of paper that she paints over and over and over and over again with black paint. And
Mhm.
then she creates the creates the piece from this stuff that she spends really months preparing. And it's kind of I don't know. I don't want to say too much more about it, but I think it's a wonderful image for, for the book. And we truly, truly thank Barbara for donating this image to us. And her story is in the book, which is also an amazing story.
Thank you so much for that storytelling, and give us a little bit of context for that wonderful artwork. I know it grabs people all the time, and we want to make sure it continues to be on the shelves. It gets your attention. Um, so this last one, and then we kind of put this into a bit of like final thoughts. We have a couple people who have uh, asked, like Cheryl Gooch, also Bernita Matt, and Bernadine Halls is also like, how do we mobilize on the resources and the history that is documented on this book? What is it? Does it look like have you all done book clubs around this? Have people been teaching this work? How can we as a community come together and really support and mobilize this knowledge and make sure that the generations who are present now and the generations who are coming, have this knowledge and continue to walk with it? How can what things are y'all doing, and how can we continue to support that or get engaged with it?
Well, I have to say that we absolutely appreciate that question, and the timing is of that question is impeccable. It's perfect. One of our primary objectives and purpose behind writing this book, and realizing that there were a number. Well, one of our primary projects right now focuses on getting this book into classrooms. We have a project that's called They Carried Us for the Classroom. We have recently had some exploratory discussions with about 25 teachers of the School District of Philadelphia, and through Teach for America. And they have informed us, given us a preliminary view of their sense of how we could how the book can be used as a supplemental resource in the schools. So that's the backdrop on this next part. How can you help? What can you do? Listen, we all know that our kids don't know enough about their history, and that's where all of us come in. This book needs to be in classrooms, and so during the next couple of months, we will be rolling out a campaign for obviously during the holidays to um, get books, into schools. We don't have the location yet for um, where we how the logistics around that, but we are working with the school district of Philadelphia, and we are going to be, asking folks to buy books for schools. We have ourselves, put resources into this project by, getting the books to the teachers who participated in these focus groups that I'm discussing. And we know that they believe that their peers are going to want to use the books in their classrooms. And so we're looking at middle school and high school right now. It's probably about 10 different schools that are represented. And these teachers need the books so they could teach these lessons to the kids. Fasaha, you want to jump in? Is there anything that I
Yeah,
missed with that?
I guess one of the things, first of all, I really think that I want to share with everybody that what we've been, we have decided that when we talk about the book, we want to foreground what we can learn from these women.
Mhm.
And so we have started talking about, whenever people ask us to talk about the book, we have been talking about what can we learn from them. And so this whole educational focus is something that is really, I think that that undergirds our whole effort.
Yeah.
Okay. This whole effort is all about, what people can learn from these women. And so it naturally flows into schools, book clubs, so I think there are a number of um, settings where this book is really appropriate.
And what I want to add, and I'm putting into the chat right now. Uh, I'm putting my email address into the chat. However, we are, and in addition to that, we are on Facebook and our website. I'm going to put that into the chat as well. But for folks who want to stay in touch with us and become a part of this campaign, we're going to be, this information and what the project is going to look like, that will be on our website, and it will be on our Facebook page and probably our other social media pages as well. And if you want to get involved, if you want to talk to us about book clubs and that kind of thing, drop me a message on my email address I just put into the chat. And I want to say follow us, but what I really mean by that is come along with us. And let's do this thing. This is important history. It's not just Philadelphia history, although that's critically important. Our kids need to know that. This is Black history, and this is Black women's history, and there's so much that can be learned from They Carried Us.
That you are doing a great job of getting us, and we put all those links into the chat so folks know where to find you all. In terms of just like final thoughts, I want to lift up someone in the chat. Put up Tawana Jones, who runs Re-Rain, which is a group Southwest West Philadelphia that mentors young women.
Okay.
This is their book that they'll be using for their gender justice ambassador program. Just put that in the chat. So
Okay.
Oh,
All right.
wow.
people are mobilizing with it.
Just please ask her to follow. To just drop me an email, and so we can
Yep.
stick it together.
That's great. Somebody also shouted out 55th and Addison Street.
Oh,
I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it.
better known as 55A. I'm just saying.
So with that, is there any sort of like final words as we close this out? You already gave like the contact information, but in terms of all being right in the world and what's next, any final thoughts from you both?
Well, I think the one thing that I want to say is that I think what we can learn from all of these women, and especially now that we, given the current circumstance in the country, is the lesson of perseverance.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a common thread throughout these women's lives. And it's something I think that, sounds kind of like an old-fashioned word, but I think it may be a word that we need to stimulate a comeback to, because perseverance clearly has been important for all of these women.
Yeah, I don't know that I will add anything. I think that what, as Fasaha, frames it is enough said. Yeah.
So this is awesome. I want to thank you both for making this a really amazing hour at documenting our history, making connections, and really building community. And I know there's so many people who will continue to engage with They Carried Us and read and spread it to the neighbors. Someone said, I think it was Miss Bernita, who said it makes a great Christmas or Kwanzaa gift.
Yes,
Sure.
yes, absolutely.
Yes.
So consider that we have you can buy it. I know Harriet's bookshop has it. There's also links on bookshop.org and other online spaces where you can find the book. And make sure you get one for your school or teacher or classroom libraries as well. Thank you so much for making time on this Thursday evening to have this conversation with the Paul Robeson House and Museum. We are so grateful and look forward to having you at the House Museum once we're safe to do so. It would be a
Okay.
beautiful thing to do.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Chris, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure,
And
sure.